Greetings and welcome to my channel. Today I want to go over how COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment, is calculated and how it determines what your Social Security and military pension increases are going to be. Specifically, this happens in December of each year, so the 2022 COLA will start being paid in December. So like for example, with my military pension, the final payment at the end of December, beginning of January, however you want to look at it, is the first one that's impacted by the cost of living adjustment, or COLA. At 5.9%, last year was the largest COLA since 1982. Lately, we've heard a lot in the news about how inflation hasn't been this high since the early 80s, and you can see on this chart from the Social Security website that yes, the increase of 5.9%, we haven't had an increase. In 2008, we had a 5.8% increase, but then we have to go all the way back to 1982 to find one that was higher at 7.4%. COLA is based on inflation, which makes sense, but how is this calculated? Here's the COLA computation information from Social Security as well. And it's using it's actually an example calculating the 2021 COLA, which increased at the end of last year. So the last year in which a COLA became effective was 2020. Therefore, the law requires that we use the average CPI-W, that includes energy and food, for the third quarter of 2020 as the base from which we measure the increase, if any, in the average CPI-W. The base average is 253.412 as shown in the table below. Also shown in the table below, the average CPI-W for the third quarter of 2021 is 268.421. Because this average exceeds 253.412 by 5.9%, the COLA effective for December 2021 is 5.9%. The COLA calculation with the result rounded to the nearest 1/10 of 1% is, and then it shows you how to calculate it. You take the current year, third quarter average, which in this case was $268.421. You subtract last year's, or the 2020 third quarter average, and that gives you the increase in the index. And then you divide that by the previous year's third quarter average, and then multiply by 100 to get the percentage. And you can see in the chart, they went ahead and they broke it down into July, August, September of 2020 and 2021, added them together, divided by 3, rounded to the nearest 0.001, and that's how they determine their average to calculate the percent increase. This is also from Social Security, and this is where I'm getting my historical numbers. You'll notice that in 1974, the index started at 46.9. And through the years, obviously, the number goes up. And we noticed that our most recent was May of this year, 2022, and it's at 288.022. Obviously, we don't have July, August, and September for this year. You notice the ones from last year match what we had in the chart from the calculation. So we need to estimate the 3 values for this year for July, August, and September if we want to come up with some idea of what the COLA will be for 2022. To look at the data in another way, we have this graph and you'll notice the CPI is generally linear. The graph starts in 1985, so we don't see the big jumps in the 70s and early 80s, but we do see what happened in 2008. We had high inflation followed by deflation, then quickly returned to a basically linear increase. As you can also see, CPI has veered off significantly over the past year. This section here is even more extreme, obviously, than what happened in 2008 with inflation. But this is what we're currently undergoing, and this is why our CPI and our inflation, just shows that it's been extremely high for the past year. Here's my spreadsheet calculating COLA, and it matches the actual COLA from the last 2 years highlighted in green. You'll see here for the 2021 increase and the 2020 increase and the 2021 increase. Notice it's 5.9%. I did a 3-month rolling average. That's what this center number is. So this matches the calculation from what we saw before. We had 253.412 for 2020, 268.421 for 2021. We subtract and take the difference, find the percent increase, and that happened to be 5.9%. So what I need to do is project out the next 4 months of 2022. I decided to do 4 different projections to come up with some idea and maybe help me come up with an idea of what our increase might be at the end of the year. So this first one, I projected an actual decrease, so an actual deflationary period where prices are already coming back down in this quarter. So what I did is I included something similar to what happened in 2008. I think it is unlikely that this will be the trajectory over the next 4 months. It may happen, but I don't think it will yet, since consumer spending still seems to be strong. But you'll notice that I basically reduced it by 1 each month. So our projected decrease from 288, I went down to 287, 286, 285, 284. My 3-month rolling averages actually increased slightly. For the 3 months ending June of this year. And then it starts getting affected by these lower numbers. I still go up to 287, then down to 286, then down to 285 as the average. So you'll notice 286, 285, 284 gives me an average of 285. This compared to last year's number of 268. So even with deflation over the next 4 months, I still end up with an increase of 6.2%, which is greater than last year's COLA. Remember, this is the cost of living adjustment. This is the amount that your Social Security or military pension will increase by. So this is an estimate for if we have deflation over the next 4 months. Again, I don't think that's likely. This projection is for no change. So if it remains exactly the same, so we don't have any increase in inflation. So it remains at 288.022. So obviously at the end, our average will be 288.022 for the third quarter. This is an increase over the 268.421 of last year, giving us a 7.3% COLA. I feel this is possible if we have plateaued. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but if we have plateaued, it could be something like this. In this projection, I use the average increase since 1985, which happened to be 0.408. So notice I just took the current 288.022, added 0.408 to it, and did that for each month through the third quarter. This obviously increases our average a little bit up to 289.246 compared to last year. That's a 7.8% COLA. I feel this is the most likely since we are currently still on an upward trend and consumer spending seems to be holding up for now. In this projection, I use the continued high inflation average that we've seen since January of last year, which is an increase of 1.925 per month. So you'll notice here, I'm adding that to the 288.022 all the way through the third quarter, which it brings us to 295.722, bringing our average for the third quarter to 293.797 compared to the 2021 number. And that gives us an increase of 9.5%. I feel this is the maximum and somewhat unlikely, but I'm not counting it completely out because we have been having this extremely high inflationary period. It's nearly impossible to call the top, but I do feel like there are signs with the interest rates increasing. Home prices are actually being dropped in areas. Like I said, a lot of reports are showing spending still strong. So at some point, it's going to break. At some point, we're going to plateau, or even just sharply start declining. But I have no idea when that's going to be. Obviously, I'm just estimating. I've plotted my different projections and added an average of the projections. I feel this is a good possibility of what we will end up with, and we'll see how I did later this year. Again, this is just a guess as to what we might see. I went ahead and did a bar chart projecting what the payment increases would be if we end up with that 7.7% that I'm estimating. So if your current Social Security or military pension is $1,000 a month, it should increase obviously to $1,077. If it's $2,000, it'll be $2,154. And I just did a few examples here to show you what that increase might look like in your monthly check. In summary, I don't expect to see deflation over the next 4 months, but we could possibly see some in a month or two, and possibly, at least no increase potentially in inflation. Even so, we're still looking at a pretty significant COLA, and probably one that potentially is higher than the one from 1982 at 7.4%. So obviously our 5.9 from last year was the highest since then. And it's possible that we could have this. I hope inflation gets under control. We keep hearing in the news how we haven't seen this in the past 40 years. And obviously I don't remember that because I was pretty young when that happened. But historically, you hear about the 70s and the inflation in the late 70s and early 80s. And you can see people that had like mortgages with extremely high rates, and people who had bonds at, like 12% bonds and stuff, or higher even. I can't remember how high they were, but the rates were ridiculously high just because inflation was so high. So you needed to be able to continue living, obviously. Hopefully we return to a more normal level next year. I'd like to see obviously below 4, hopefully around 3%, which between 2.5% and 3% would be great if we can get back down there. The sooner the better. In fact, I do predict that we will have some deflation over the next couple of years to get us back down to that from that the graph I showed you earlier of how mostly linear the CPI increase has been over the years. I think we'll return back to that line, kind of like in 2008 we had that dip that basically got us back onto that line. Remember, if you have any comments and you have questions, leave those below. Consider liking and subscribing, or not. You could dislike, it's fine. I'm trying to work on these videos. I think I got the audio straightened out a little better where it matches the video. I had to put a little delay in the audio. And remember, if you're going to retire to something.